Great to be here with you. I'm José Pires, the CEO and founder of Global Excellence and Innovation, and we're going to talk about how great organizations build cultures of excellence, innovation, and value creation. You're going to see some of the themes that I'm going to talk about going to be very close to some of the other talks that you have listened to so far, and there will be definitely some very new practical perspectives. What I want to share with you here is not my view of the world, is not how I think things work. This is just how they actually work. This is not my personal principles. These are not my personal views on how things work. I'm not a visionary leader who can predict the future. Basically, what I have done throughout my career is to work with amazing organizations that I have allowed me to experiment to a great level. And as part of that experimentation, I have learned what works and I have learned what doesn't work. And when something works, I try to understand why it works, and then I scale that. And if you fast forward that, there's amazing organizations that I work for as not as a consultant, but an actual executive leader, accelerating excellence and innovation for these organizations. And then if you add the hundreds of other organizations that I have been an advisor for, there are a lot of great practical advice that's going to be built in here. In reality, over 30,000 excellence and innovation leaders in more than 100 organizations in over 20 countries. So when I talk about culture today, it's going to be a very practical application of culture and also a very practical application of cultural transformation. But I want to start with mindset. I want to start with the world in which we live in that's changing at an incredible pace, a real exponential pace. And with that, I ask you the following questions, and I'm going to ask you to use the questions box on your GoToWebinar interface to share your perspectives with me. Think about the world that we have today. Think about where you are physically, and tell me how far would you get in your physical space, if you're in your apartment, in your house, whatever you're attending this from that physical space. If you took from where you are, if you took 30 steps and each step was 1 meter, you would go 30 meters. Just imagine, if you're not constrained by the walls in your house, if you're going a straight line, where would you end up, physically speaking? So I want you to have the mental model. Don't answer that right now. Just think about that. That's the way that we as humans interpret the world. It's a very linear model of the world around us. And if I told you take one step, each step is 1 meter, how far would you go in 30 steps? You'll be 30 meters. Think about that location, where you are in the world right now. You're 30 meters away from your location. Very good. But what if I told you that the world has not been changing 1 meter at a time? The world has been changing and at a much more exponential rate than that. And what if I told you that for the last 30 cycles, and I'll explain to you later on what a cycle looks like, for the last 30 cycles in our history, what we have experienced is actually that when we take one step, the first step is 1 meter, but that second step is no longer another meter. That second step is doubling. And now that second step is 2 meters long. And then I take yet another step after that. And that next step, my third step now, is 4 meters long. So think about taking those steps in an exponential fashion. And as you take those steps, you go from 1, and then you double to 2, and you double to 4, you double to 8, and you still take 30 steps. You go for 30 cycles, you take your 30 steps, but for how far would you go now? How far would you go? Go into the question box and tell me where you end up. How far do you get? Give me like a milestone, a physical location. Like before, you're 30 meters away from your location. Now, where are you? If you are in Houston, are you outside of your apartment now? Are you outside of your house? Are you outside of your office? Go into the questions box and tells me that if you take 30 steps and every step you double, how far do you go from where you are right now? Enter that into the questions box. Go into the questions box and enter where you are now. And I'm watching you here, waiting for your feedback on where you are after you take 30 steps, where you double in every step. Go ahead, provide your guidance, and I'm keeping an eye on that. So very good. So keep going. Well done. I'm looking for your insights. How far you go. I see one person here entered that I am going to, I'm 2 blocks away. Awesome, Janice. Janice is 2 blocks away. Now, Senep is in Copenhagen, and he says that he'll be halfway. Angela said that she's going to be in the stratosphere outside of my subdivision. Michael Thompson, maybe in my backyard, Clarice said. Okay, wonderful. Montreal, Quebec from Vincent. Wonderful. You're providing me your insights on where you're going to be. That's terrific. That's terrific. So you took 30 steps, and look how much farther you have gone, because now you're doubling every one of your steps. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to stop for a moment. And for those of you who didn't even have the courage to say how far they would go, I want you to internalize this thought. And I want you to think about how far you'd go. And you told me, oh, maybe now I get outside of the house. Now I get in my backyard. Now I get outside of my subdivision. Now, some crazy person says that I get outside of the city. Wow, that's really nuts, isn't it? Well, if you took 30 steps, and every time you take a step, you double the steps, you would go around planet Earth 26 times. You're no longer 30 meters away from your original point. You're 1 billion meters away from your original point. Why am I asking you to do this? Because your brain is linear. And even when I push your brain to go bold and to go big, it's really hard, because your brain still interprets the world as a linear system. Nothing wrong with you. That's how our frontal cortex has actually developed. So we're not living in that linear world. We're living in this exponential world. And this is the reason that I want to highlight this for you, because a lot of changes in society and a lot of technological changes that have happened have not been linear. They have been exponential. And you all can, to a large extent, we can go back to Dr. Gordon Moore at Intel when he came up with Moore's law, which he actually didn't even come up with that. Others associated that with him. In 1965, he realized that the number of transistors doubled every year from the period that Intel was really scaling up production of transistors. And he predicted that that trend would continue for decades to come. And everybody said, are you out of your mind? There is no way that we can do that. Do you know how hard it is to pack twice as many transistors per unit area at affordable cost every 18 months or so? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the semiconductor industry has done that for over 30 cycles, and that's roughly 50 plus years where that Moore's law has lasted. So if you look back at 1958, we had 2 transistors per unit area. You go to 1971, and the new chips have 2,300 transistors, and there are 10,000 nanometers in the gates. You look at Intel Core i9 from 2018, and that chip has over 7 billion transistors at 14 nanometer gaps. Now, the question is that, have we improved linearly here? No, we have improved exponentially. And even more so than what I showed you before, we have actually had a price performance improvement that is a 27 billion fold improvement in the last 47 years. Now, what does that mean? That means that our brains notice that technology is changing, but we still think of it very linearly, and we don't realize the extent at which this thing has happened around us. And the issue is that Moore's law and the semiconductor industry have driven the performance of many other technologies that existed for a while, and they're dormant, but now they have also jumped on this high processing capability curve, if you will, which is exponential, which has the semiconductor industry as a baseline, and it has accelerated all of these technologies at once. This is unprecedented in human history. So when you feel overwhelmed about what's going on, well, you should be, because your brain cannot even understand what's going on. Let's look back. 1956, do you see that Pan Am flight? We're putting a 5 megabyte hard drive on that Pan Am flight. That hard drive weighed nearly a ton, and costs $120,000 for 5 megabytes of memory. You fast forward for 2005, you have 128 megabytes of memory for $99. You fast forward a little bit further, you have 128 gigabytes for $99. So what we have experienced is a 10 trillion fold improvement in price performance over that period of time. Not only the hard drive from 1956 is obsolete, the airline from 1956 is obsolete. So exponential change, not linear. You look at other examples, that's the first commercial GPS receiver in 1981. It weighed 53 pounds and costs $120,000. How would you like to have that on the dashboard of your car? Well, you look at where GPS receivers are even in 2010, they're a small chip that you see there on someone's finger at less than $5 each. And today they're much cheaper and they're much smaller because they continue to accelerate exponentially. You look at Steven Sasson at Kodak presenting his first digital camera. It was a beauty, $10,000, 4 pounds, 0.01 megapixels. Everybody said, Steve, nobody will ever use digital technology for pictures. So fast forward that, you have now digital cameras that have 10 megapixels at 0.03 pounds and $10, and you have bugs in military experiments that have multiple cameras like that with greater resolution. So this did not get a little bit better, it has gotten 1 billion times better. And this is across multiple technologies. If you look at what we had, you know, at a certain point, you go back like 20 plus years, and we used to carry all that stuff around, you know, all that equipment, thousands and thousands of dollars that we spent on that stuff so that we're in the edge of technology. And where is all that stuff today? It's in the back of our pockets. And we're complaining because the Wi-Fi connection is a little glitchy. Now, this is important for us to notice that we see the world as a linear system and we see what's happening around us very linearly, but we're going to be surprised because what's happening around us is very exponential, and we are all up to have our Kodak moment. And even Kodak can come back up on an exponential world like that. Now, this is not specific to a company. This is not specific to an organization. This cuts across all organizations. This prediction was from 2011, not now. Before the pandemic hits, not 10 years later, but 8 to 9 years later, that number was wrong. Not 40% of the Fortune 500 companies no longer existed. It was over 50% that ceased to exist during that time period. So when you talk to leaders and organizations, to CEOs and C-suite level across all industries, they will tell you that what they're most concerned today is not their operating model or even their organization strategy. They are concerned about the culture of change. Now, let's talk about the culture of change, and we have to go through this at a very fast pace, so don't have time to theorize too much with you. Very practical approaches. So let's start with what is culture, and culture is very simple. Simplify culture by saying that culture are the habits and behaviors of individuals and teams in the organization, is what they exhibit. That creates the culture. People's minds are not changed through argument, they're changed through observation, and the habits and behaviors that you observe become part of who you are and becomes the culture of the organization. Now the question is, what is a good culture then? And that can be a very complex question because you have to decide in each organization what is the culture that you want to have for your own context. But I'll posit to you that all good cultures have value creation behaviors. Now, whether that is financial value for profit or social value for nonprofit, it doesn't matter, but there's either financial or social value creation behaviors. So understanding that is very important because then we have to think about how do we build and transform cultures in our business. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to do because it's multifaceted and it has several stages, and most organizations do not understand the whole. The leaders do not understand the whole, and they miss several of these components as they try to implement a culture or transform a culture in an organization. But in a very summarized fashion, Good value creation cultures have very clear purpose to start with. They have a strong set of core values and beliefs associated with that purpose. And they establish moods and feelings associated with those values and beliefs. And those moods and feelings establish the mindsets that you have across the organization. And that's all very interesting, but now you need to develop principles associated with those mindsets. And those, if for example, if you're trying to accelerate innovation, what are the principles of innovation? So you implement those principles, but that's not enough. And that's more where most organizations stop, because principles by themselves become platitudes. You need to develop the mechanisms that will translate the principles into actions. And once you have the mechanisms that translate the principles into actions, now you are starting to showcase the behaviors that are associated with the principles, mindsets, moods and feelings, values and beliefs that drive that ultimate purpose. All of these components must be in place. And if they're not in place, your culture will fail. Your cultural transformation will fail. Now let's talk about transformation for a second. Setting culture is difficult. Changing culture and transforming culture, that's incredibly hard, because transformations require you to change what your culture resists the most. As human beings and as organizations, we resist what we most need to change. This is not just your organization or you personally. It's just about being human, and organizations today are just a combination of several humans working together. And remember, organizations are like people. They're not wired for change. They long for safety and predictability, and change is nowhere in there. So the question becomes, oh my goodness, José, I'm leaving, you just described this world that's changing exponentially that I have to adapt to. At the same time, you say that we need to intentionally set our cultures. You have to go through all of these stages. And then you're saying that expect a lot of resistance, because people are going to resist what they most need to change. Very true. Let's make it even a little bit more complex. Let's try to predict the future, because we don't know what the future looks like. There are only two types of people who can predict the future: those who don't know, and those who don't know that they don't know. Which one is you? Which one is your organization? There is only one way of predicting the future. The only way to predict the future is to create it. So let's start moving to a more optimistic mindset here, and let's figure out, how do I create the future? How do I create the future and the culture that I need to have to be a high-performing, successful organization in this fast-moving landscape? So let's set the stage for innovation, because if we're going to create the future, we have to innovate. Although I'll tell you right up front that innovation alone is not enough, but it's necessary. So let's define innovation to start. What is innovation? And I have to be short in my delivery here because of our time. So I will shorten the discussion by telling you the following. If you want to have extraordinary innovation in your organization, you must define it in ordinary terms, in ways that anyone in your organization, from the lowest level to the highest level, can understand, and they can do something about it. You cannot define innovation as the disruptive type that Google, Facebook, and Tesla are doing right now, which is true, but it's only 10% of their overall portfolio of innovations, and it covers 100% of media attention. So do not be distracted by that. What does innovation mean to you, to every professional in your organization, in a way that's actionable? And innovation is certainly about new ideas, but new ideas are not enough. You need new ideas that create value. Remember, good cultures are value creation cultures. So your definition of innovation to affect culture must connect innovation and value creation. It's not about technology. It's not about just new things. It's about new ideas that create value. And that is not enough, because lots of people have new ideas that create value, and they get buried in cemeteries in the parking lot of organizations. because you need to have people who are willing to put their reputation behind those new ideas that create value to implement those ideas. So to have extraordinary innovation, define innovation in ordinary terms, which means innovation is simply the implementation of new ideas that create value. That can happen at any level in your organization, from the lowest level professional to the CEO of the company. He or she can implement new ideas that create value. But this is good. This is a principle. What is the mechanism? How do I translate some of these principles into actions that create value? So for innovation acceleration to become a reality in your organization, it demands an integrated mechanism. And this integrated mechanism needs to accelerate innovation. It needs to accelerate collaborative leadership development, specifically because that's required for innovation acceleration at scale. And it will drive strategy, execution, and value creation. And I like the tagline there, and I'll share with you, because great enduring organizations and leaders have that in their mindset. They are looking at opportunities to create the most value in the shortest time and simplest means. This is the improvement in innovation venture capitalist mindset. Create the most value in the shortest time and simplest means. Now, this is all good, but I still need mechanisms. I need disciplined approaches for execution. What can I use for that, José? Well, there are many methods. There are many proven approaches where you can have a disciplined implementation of innovation. Now, you have explicit innovation methods, tools and techniques and systems that you can implement to think different and innovate. Innovation is not an escape from disciplined thinking. Innovation, as we understand it today, is an escape with disciplined thinking. So think of innovation as a discipline with methods and approaches, and you should learn those, and those are discipline frameworks for innovation implementation. That's one component that we see often nowadays. Another component is good old business process management, is truly understanding your end-to-end processes and their ownership in the organization. This sounds like common sense, but common sense is the least common of the senses in large organizations. And most organizations do not truly understand how their value creation processes flow from end to end. So this is another incredible source and discipline for innovation acceleration. And then you have more traditional methods like Lean and Six Sigma, efficiency methods that can help you tremendously by increasing speed of flow, eliminating waste, reducing variation, satisfying customers. And there are many other processes and methods that you can use. Agile, Scrum if you're in the software industry, and so on and so forth. But here's the deal. What's most important and what we have learned when it comes to real cultural transformation is that you are consistent and disciplined in your approaches. So separate, any one of these methodologies can be effective, but when they're combined, they're exceptional. And it should never be about the methodology. It should be about your ability to create value. You're not creating leaders of methodology. You're creating value creation leaders. Because remember, methods alone, they do not transform businesses. People do. Value creation leaders create value creation cultures. So let's review what we have covered so far, because I know I have thrown a lot at you. So let's take a look. And I want you to think internally, answer this multiple choice question to yourself. What matters most when it comes to accelerating innovation for value creation and setting a culture of value creation, of excellence, of innovation and value creation? Is it about ideas? Is it about methods? Is it about technologies? Or is it about people? Well, I'll tell you the answer. I want you to think in your own terms. I want you to internalize in your context and think which one you think is more important. And then I'll give you the answer. And the answer is all of the above and none of the above. And that's a little complex. The world of greatness is very complex because it's filled with contradictions, forces pulling in different directions. The world of greatness is not an or world, it's an and world, and requires the blending of these forces that pull in different directions. Very rarely you have one silver bullet, one factor that drives the entire performance of the system. It is the intelligent blending of these multiple factors that will do it. But let's look at each one of them and the contradictions that each one of them poses. First of all, ideas. Ideas are very important. Ideas, you need ideas. You need creativity to generate ideas. You need disciplined approaches to narrow down the value creation ideas, to implement innovation. Ideas are very important. But also, ideas are everywhere. What are uncommon are people willing to put their reputation behind ideas. Oh, okay, so let's move on to methods. Jose, you just talked about methods. Methods are really important because methods provide a disciplined framework to implementing this change and to build this new culture that I want to have. Well, that is true, but also remember that I said that methods do not transform businesses. People do. For over 25 years, I have been a certified Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. For most people, that sounds like a dangerous mental condition. It doesn't help them. What really helps them is, how do I use those methods to create the most value in the shortest time and simplest means? So it must be about technologies then. Well, technology is great. Jose just talked about exponential technologies. We have to use RPA, NLP, AR, VR, MR, XR, blockchain. Wow, we're going to roll out of these technologies. Well, these technologies are great and they will provide great competitive advantages in certain contexts. On the other hand, as at least two other world leaders in cultural transformation have shared with you, technology can make stupid happen at the speed of light. So technology is like a romantic lover. It is very exciting in the beginning, solves one big problem, but in the long run, if you don't pay attention, it creates 10 new problems. So you have to be careful about the technologies you choose, and you have to make sure that you're choosing the right technologies for your business. And lastly is people. Oh, it must be about people, right? Because people are our most important asset. Yes and no. Yes, people are for sure essential to any business. But when you're looking at setting culture, when you're looking at accelerating innovation, you want to engage everyone, but you really need to find the right people. The right people are the amplifiers in your organization. They are amplifiers of innovation. They are amplifiers of the culture and the behaviors that you want to have. They are value creation leaders that you want to amplify in your organization. So it is about finding these right people. So what are these right people? How do you find them? That is the ultimate question, because it's through these people that you're going to impact your entire organization. So what we have learned for practice is that these people, they do not come from the HR list of high-performing individuals. They do not come from senior leader observations on who they think should be the next leaders. They are only revealed by the test of execution, and specifically the test of value creation and innovation execution. So you can only find them when you set up a system with a meritocracy of ideas, clear execution mechanisms, and discipline frameworks for execution. You make it accessible to everyone in the organization, and you let the system play itself out. And you see those who step up to the plate and those who actually are able to collaboratively lead innovation for value creation for your organization. And your job as a leader is to set up that environment, to set up that system. So because what you're looking for are people who have 4 specific traits, and they are only revealed by the test of execution. These individuals have purpose that aligns with the purpose of the business. They have a strong sense of passion for what they do. They are highly disciplined in their execution and identification of opportunities and execution, and they're resilient. Now, I don't have time to go into each one of these in depth. Probably the most important ones, couple that I want to make it sure here that you understand, is that they're all pretty much self-explanatory. But passion here is not like this romanticized view of passion, is a lot more like an arranged marriage. I'm looking for people who have passion that was developed by working on really hard problems and really not even liking that problem for a period of time, and they work their face off at it. And over time, they develop an appreciation for it and they develop the passion for it. not this romanticized view of passion. And when it comes to discipline, I'm not only looking for people who are able to follow a regimented set of rules. That's not what discipline really is. The ultimate definition of discipline is consistency with purpose. I am looking for people who are chronically consistent with their purpose. The signature of mediocrity for people and organizations is actually not an unwillingness to change. The signature of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency. So when I think about discipline, I think about chronically consistent individuals. Consistent with what? Consistent with their purpose and the purpose of the organization. Purpose, passion, discipline, resilience are only revealed by the test of execution. So how do you set that up? So I'm going to give you a very quick overview here in the last 7 minutes or so that we have on how organizations do that successfully. Very practical approach on how it's done. Most organizations look like what you have here on the screen. Bunch of people in the organization, the overwhelming majority of those people are sour-faced, and that has nothing to do with how much money they make. It has everything to do with the fact that what they work on is not really something that is aligned with their purpose as an individual. It is a job. They make lots of money often in that job. No correlation with your level of compensation and your level of satisfaction when you're making more than 6 figures in the United States. No correlation. So, and then among them, you have these happy ones. And these individuals, they can be crazy, delusionally happy, perhaps. The other one is that the other possibility is the one that I'm hoping for is that they have somehow found an alignment between their lives and the work that they do. And they are at work in presence or remotely, but they have a level of satisfaction about that. I make no judgments. What you should do as a leader is to set up a system that says we have a meritocracy of ideas. We have clear execution mechanisms. It's accessible to all of you. I am gonna work with you to develop your collaborative leadership skills. I'm gonna develop your discipline innovation skills. And when you set that up, these self-motivated individuals, they start moving towards it because they want that. They have been longing for that. Now, this is excellent because when you set that up, you have attracted these self-motivated individuals and you're inspiring them to do greater things. Now, inspiration and motivation is like a rocking chair. There is a lot of motion, but you don't get anywhere. So you need to, now that you have their attention, you need to make it very clear to them and to everybody else in the organization, what are the discipline execution mechanisms that we have for identifying, prioritizing, and executing on what creates the most value in the shortest time and simplest means. It's your job to create that mechanism, and if that mechanism is properly set up, you're going to have an over 99% implementation rate over decades. But that mechanism has to be clear and accessible to all. Now, when you have that going on, you have now a clear system for identifying, prioritizing, and executing what creates the most value in the shortest time and simplest means. The individuals who successfully deliver value creation and strategy execution at scale for the organization. When you look at those successful individuals, they have passion, discipline, and resilience. That is how you find them. It's like, not to compare to war situations, but it's not completely analogous, but there's this research actually came from Daniel Kahneman looking at the Israeli military. And the Israeli military, you don't find the great warriors by just seeing who is the best person at boot camp. You find the great warriors are revealed in the theater of war. And they're not the people you think early on. Maybe the best recruit or the best performer at the boot camp is not necessarily the best warrior. So you find these individuals through the test of execution when it comes to innovation, because there's a lot of uncertainty, much like a war situation would provide. So passion, discipline, and resilience is revealed by that. What you do with these individuals now, these are your amplifiers. This is what you're mining for. They're the gold you're mining for. You make a big deal out of them. You celebrate their teams and their accomplishments with the organization. And what you start seeing in the organizations, that others see that the role models for value creation in the organization and leadership of value creation are no different than than who that person, someone else in the organization is today. I see Jeff up there who just completed a $5 million innovation project, and Jeff did this without being a subject matter expert. He's a just great collaborative leader and a value creation leader. Now Rick is down here and saying, you know what? If Jeff can do it, I can do it too. And now you're democratizing value creation and innovation in your own organization. Of course, this is a journey. You're going to have to go through the cycle several times, because every time you do this, you're exhibiting the value creation behaviors that you want others in the organization to emulate. People's minds are not changed through argument. They're changed through observation of the value creation behaviors that they have now in front of them. If you do this at a scale over a longer period of time, you're going to have alignment over time, and you're going to create this great enduring organization. Let's be honest. Most organizations will never get there. Why? Because they are chronically inconsistent with their purpose. That is the signature of mediocrity, which is most organizations and people are destined to, because they're chronically inconsistent with their purpose. So for those who are chronically consistent with their purpose, with clear execution mechanisms like this, their people will exhibit the behaviors that will set the culture that you want to have. I challenge you to use this approach to initiatives that you have in your organization. And you tell me, after 18 months and a few cycles, how much organizational change you actually have observed now. Now, to summarize all of this and wrap up my talk, the culture is defined by the behaviors in the organization. If you want to have a good culture, you need to have value creation behaviors. If you want to have value creation behaviors, you need to develop the mindsets, the mechanisms to showcase the behaviors for value creation and innovation. Those individuals are not going to come from other organizations. They work for you right now. And your job as a leader is to create a system, a meritocracy of ideas with clear execution mechanisms that allows them to step up and have the willingness to try something different. And then it's your job as a leader to train them in collaborative leadership skills and innovation skills that forces them to take different perspectives at problems to unearth novel solutions. And you need to support them because they need to have the courage to step out and take risks that they're not accustomed to. I'm not talking about disproportionate risks. I'm talking about well-managed risks that still require courage because they are stepping away from their comfort zone. And your ultimate job as a leader is to create an environment where these great people and their great ideas can connect. That's the ultimate accelerator of innovation, the ultimate accelerator of innovation for value creation. So to finalize, I cannot predict the future. You cannot predict the future. It's changing exponentially. You must be chronically consistent with your purpose amongst all that change. And if you want to develop the ultimate competitive advantage for your business, you need to build a culture of excellence and innovation, a culture of value creation. So we do not have time for questions. I filled in here because José had problems with his technologies when he was trying to connect. I will try to reconnect him at the top of the hour for us here. You know me from being the chair of this conference. You know you can follow me on LinkedIn. This is direct access to more information on this journey of culture transformation and value creation. So thank you for your time with us. I'm going to close the webinar at this point. I'll take your questions on LinkedIn or an email later on. And at the top of the hour, would like to welcome back Cisco for their presentation and their views of culture change and culture transformation. Thank you everybody for your time. We'll see you back at the top of the hour.